I was rinsing off the dinner plates when she said it, right in front of her sister and her kids. "You need to know your place in this house." They all laughed. I froze with my hands in the soapy water, staring at the bubbles popping one by one. Something shifted inside me, not rage, just clarity. It was like a fog lifting, revealing a path I'd been too afraid to see. That was the moment I stopped trying to be part of a family that never saw me as equal. My wife, Rebecca, leaned back in her chair with that satisfied smirk she wore whenever she put me down. Her sister, Jennifer, nodded in agreement, sipping wine like they just shared some profound wisdom. The kids didn't even look up from their phones. I dried my hands slowly, carefully, and turned to look at them all. Rebecca's eyes met mine for a second, but she looked away first. She always did when I refused to react. I didn't say a word. I just finished the dishes in silence while they moved to the living room, their laughter echoing through the house that suddenly felt like a prison. Before we continue, I would like to know where you're watching from in the comment section. Also hit the subscribe button and share this video, as this will help this video to travel far, so others can learn also. That night, her son Tyler muttered under his breath as I passed his room, "Why does he even try? He's not even our real dad." I stopped in the hallway, my hand on the wall for balance. The words hit harder than I expected. I heard it clearly. Rebecca did too. She was right behind me. I turned to look at her, waiting for her to say something, anything. She just glanced at Tyler's door, then at me, and shrugged before walking to our bedroom. That silence told me everything I needed to know. I stood there in the dim hallway for what felt like forever, listening to Tyler's video game, sounds bleeding through his door. Rebecca had been given a chance to defend me, to remind her son that I'd been there for 5 years, that I'd paid for his braces and his school trips and his basketball camps. But she chose silence. That choice was louder than any insult. I walked downstairs and sat in the dark kitchen, staring at nothing, feeling something inside me quietly break and rearrange itself into something harder, colder. Her sister, Jennifer, started spending more time at our house after that. One evening, Rebecca told me I'd be sleeping on the couch, so Jennifer could have space in our bedroom. Not the guest bedroom, our bedroom. No one asked me. No one cared. I grabbed my pillow without arguing and made up the couch while they giggled upstairs like teenagers at a sleepover. I wasn't a husband anymore. I was a utility, something to be moved around for their convenience. The couch was uncomfortable, springs poking through the cushions, but I didn't complain. I lay there in the darkness, listening to them laugh through the ceiling. At some point, I heard Jennifer say, "He's so easy to push around," and Rebecca responded, "I know, right?" Their laughter faded as I stared at the ceiling, counting the cracks in the plaster. 3 nights turned into a week. A week turned into 2. Jennifer made no effort to leave, sprawling across my side of the bed like she owned it. And Rebecca never once suggested I come back upstairs. That's when I realized I was already gone. They just hadn't noticed yet. I noticed our joint account missing $6,000 one morning while checking our balance before work. My stomach dropped. I logged into the full transaction history and saw a single large withdrawal dated 3 days ago. When Rebecca came downstairs, I asked her about it calmly. She barely looked up from her coffee. "It went toward family stuff," she said, waving her hand dismissively. I nodded and let it go, but later that afternoon, I found a receipt in the bathroom trash. It was from a luxury spa resort 2 hours away, a weekend package for 2 people, Rebecca and Jennifer. $6,000 for massages, facials, private yoga sessions, and gourmet meals while I ate leftovers and slept on a couch in my own house. I took a picture of the receipt and saved it to a folder on my phone I'd started calling evidence. I didn't confront her. There was no point. She'd just lie or twist it into somehow being my fault. Instead, I put the receipt back exactly where I found it and went to work like nothing happened, my jaw tight, my mind already planning 3 steps ahead. Her joke over dinner that night cut deeper than she knew. We were eating takeout, Chinese food I paid for, and Jennifer was complaining about her ex-husband's money problems. Rebecca laughed and gestured at me with her chopsticks. Even if he did have money, he wouldn't know what to do with it. They all laughed. Tyler snorted into his fried rice. I smiled too, chewing slowly, because they had no idea who my grandfather was, or what he left me. My grandfather, William, had been a quiet man like me, the kind who built wealth slowly and carefully, investing in land and businesses nobody thought would succeed. He passed away 2 years ago, but these people never asked about him, never cared. To them, I was just the guy who worked at the hardware store and fixed things around the house. Rebecca met my smile with a confused look, like she couldn't figure out why I wasn't offended. I just shrugged and reached for more lo mein, letting her think she'd won. It was easier that way, and more satisfying, knowing what was coming. Flashback to 2 years earlier. After Grandpa William passed, his lawyer, Mr. Chun, called me to his office downtown. I sat across from him in a leather chair that smelled like old books and money. He slid a folder across his mahogany desk, thick as a phone book, stuffed with documents. He looked me dead in the eye, his expression serious. You were always the only one who listened. That's why you get it all. I opened the folder with shaking hands. Properties, investments, accounts I didn't know existed. The number at the bottom made my vision blur. Over $2 million in assets, maybe more depending on market values. Grandpa had left everything to me, bypassing my parents and siblings entirely. He'd written a letter explaining that I was the only one who visited him, who asked about his stories, who cared about more than just what he could give. I sat in that office for an hour, reading and rereading everything. Then I closed the folder and made a decision. I wouldn't touch the money. Not yet. Not until I needed it. I never told Rebecca. I never told anyone. Another thing they never bothered to ask. My full legal name. When I married Rebecca, I'd been using my mother's maiden name, Carter. It was easier, simpler, less connected to my grandfather's legacy. My legal name on the trust and all those accounts was William Theodore Ashford III. Rebecca knew me as David Carter. She'd never seen my birth certificate, never questioned why my mail sometimes came addressed differently, never wondered about the locked filing cabinet in the garage. I'd taken my mom's name after my parents' messy divorce when I was 12, wanting distance from my father's side of the family drama. But legally, I was still an Ashford, and that name carried weight in certain circles. The kind of weight that came with old money, real estate holdings, and investment portfolios that grew while you slept. Rebecca had no idea. She thought she'd married some nobody handyman with no family worth mentioning. She never asked about my past, my relatives, my inheritance. She'd made assumptions and built a life on them. And now, those assumptions were about to crumble. I started watching them closely after that. No arguments. No confrontations. Just calm observation. I noticed patterns I'd ignored before. How Rebecca's spending increased when Jennifer visited, how Tyler's attitude worsened when his biological father called, how they all treated me better only when they needed something. I started keeping records. I screenshot bank statements showing Rebecca's excessive spending. I saved text messages where she talked down to me. I recorded dates and times of insults, of moments when they made me feel invisible. I bought a small notebook and wrote everything down in plain language, just facts, no emotions. My phone became an evidence vault. Photos of receipts, videos of conversations, voice memos of arguments where she'd gaslight me later. I didn't do this out of spite. I did it because I knew what was coming and I needed to be prepared. Because the downfall I was planning had to be surgical, clean, undeniable, and final. No room for her to twist the story or play the victim. Just truth, documented and irrefutable. I opened a new bank account in the trust's name, completely separate, completely private. I transferred a small amount first, just to test it, then slowly moved funds from the inheritance into active investment accounts. And I bought something small, a new laptop. Rebecca noticed it immediately when it arrived. I was setting it up at the kitchen table when she walked in and stopped, arms crossed. "Must be nice," she scoffed, eyeing the sleek silver device. "Where'd you get money for that?" I just smiled and shrugged. "Saved up," I said simply. She rolled her eyes and walked away, muttering about how I could afford computers, but apparently not a bigger grocery budget. She had no idea that laptop cost less than one of her spa days. No idea that the account it came from held more money than she'd see in 10 lifetimes. I opened the laptop and started organizing files, Evidence, legal documents, account information. Everything I'd need when the time came. Tyler walked past and glanced at it. Nice laptop, he admitted grudgingly. I nodded. Thanks. You have no idea, I thought. I met with Mr. Chin again, my grandfather's attorney. She, despite the masculine first name, looked over everything I brought. Bank statements, documentation of Rebecca's spending, records of the emotional abuse, proof of my separate assets. Mrs. Chun was actually Margaret Chun, a sharp woman in her 60s who'd handled my grandfather's affairs for 30 years. She read through everything with reading glasses perched on her nose, occasionally making notes. When she finished, she leaned back in her chair and studied me. You waited this long? You're either a saint or a genius. I didn't feel like either. I felt tired. She explained my options carefully, methodically. Since I'd kept my inheritance completely separate, Rebecca had no legal claim to it. Our marriage was in a community property state, but inherited assets stayed separate if never commingled. The house was in both names, but I could be removed with proper documentation. She could structure everything so I'd walk away clean. How soon do you want to move? She asked. I looked out her office window at the city below. Soon, I said. Very soon. At a neighborhood barbecue, I was manning the grill when I heard Jennifer's voice carry across the patio. She was talking to another neighbor, loud enough for everyone to hear. Well, he does all the cooking and cleaning, so technically he's like live-in help. Laughter erupted. I flipped a burger, my jaw clenched. Rebecca was standing right there. She didn't defend me. She actually laughed, and added, yeah, but at least he's useful. More laughter. I set down the spatula and wiped my hands on the apron. The same apron Rebecca had bought me as a joke with chief cook and bottle washer printed on it. I looked around at these people, these neighbors I'd helped with home repairs and loan tools to. None of them said a word in my defense. I smiled, nodded, and made a decision right there at that grill, smoke rising around me. I was done, completely done. I finished cooking everyone's food, served it with a smile, and started mentally packing my bags. By the time the party ended, I'd already planned my exit down to the smallest detail. She never read the paperwork I put in front of her. 2 weeks after the barbecue, I told Rebecca we needed to refinance the mortgage to get a better rate. She was watching TV, barely paying attention. I handed her the documents with sticky tabs, marking where to sign. Just some refinancing stuff, I said casually. She signed without reading, like she always did, trusting that I'd handle the boring adult responsibilities. That house, now solely in her name, including the $300,000 still owed on it. I consulted with Mrs. Chun first, made sure everything was legal and binding. The refinance removed me from the mortgage entirely. Rebecca became the sole borrower, solely responsible for every payment going forward. She had no idea she'd just signed herself into a financial trap. The original mortgage had been in both names, but this new one was all hers. I was free. I took the signed papers to the bank the next day and filed everything properly. The banker processed it without question. And just like that, I was no longer tied to that house or its massive debt. They told me Jennifer would be staying a few weeks to get back on her feet after her divorce. I cleared out the guest bedroom, moved boxes to the garage, even bought new sheets for the bed. She moved in with 2 suitcases and a smile. That was 4 months ago. She never left. Her clothes filled the closet. Her toiletries crowded the bathroom. Her mail started coming to our address. She contributed nothing. No rent, no groceries, no utilities. Just consumed and complained. Rebecca defended her constantly. She's family. She's going through a hard time. She needs us. But never we. Always us. Like Jennifer's presence was a package deal I'd silently agreed to. So I started staying somewhere else. The old family cabin my grandfather left me, tucked away in the mountains 2 hours north. I told Rebecca I was picking up extra weekend shifts at the hardware store. She barely acknowledged it, just nodded and went back to her phone. I drove up to the cabin every Friday after work and didn't return until Monday morning. They never questioned it, never asked why I was suddenly gone every weekend. They probably didn't even notice. The cabin was exactly as I remembered it from childhood visits. Secluded, surrounded by pine trees, sitting on 20 acres of land with a creek running through the back. My grandfather had bought it in the 70s for almost nothing. Now, it was worth close to $500,000, and it was completely paid off. My name was the only one on the deed, had been since the day the trust transferred. I started moving small things there. Personal things. My grandfather's pocket watch. Photo albums from before I met Rebecca. Books I collected over the years. Clothes I actually liked instead of the ones Rebecca bought me and said made me look presentable. Tools. My fishing gear. Slowly, methodically, I was preparing. The cabin had electricity, running water, a wood stove for heat, and solar panels Grandpa had installed years ago. I could live there comfortably, indefinitely. I spent my weekends fixing it up, repairing loose boards, clearing brush, making a home. Rebecca never asked where I was really going. Jennifer never cared. I was becoming invisible, and I was doing it on purpose. I showed up to Tyler's basketball game on a Tuesday night. He'd specifically told me not to embarrass him, to sit in the back, to not cheer too loud. I sat quietly in the bleachers, watching him play. Halfway through the second quarter, his biological father Marcus showed up drunk, stumbling into the gym, yelling Tyler's name. The coach had to escort him out while Tyler stood on the court, humiliated. After the game, I tried to talk to Tyler, tell him he played well despite the distraction. He just glared at me. Rebecca arrived late, having missed the whole thing. When I told her what happened with Marcus, she sighed and said, "He's still their father. You're just the support. Just the support." 5 years of showing up, of paying for things, of being there, reduced to those 4 words. Tyler walked away with his mom. I stood in the parking lot alone, car keys in my hand, watching them drive off together. They hadn't even offered me a ride, and we'd all come in the same car. I called an Uber and went back to an empty house. That night, I started packing boxes. One morning, I left. No note, no scene. Just packed my truck before dawn and disappeared. I'd spent the previous week quietly moving everything that mattered. Documents, clothes, personal items, anything with sentimental value. The truck was full but organized, everything I needed to start over. I took one last look at the house in the rearview mirror, that place I called home for 5 years but never really belonged in. Rebecca was still asleep. Jennifer too. Tyler's light was off. None of them heard me leave. I'd paid that month's utilities in advance, left food in the fridge, even left a check for Rebecca on the kitchen counter for what I calculated I owed for my share of groceries. Everything neat and clean. Then I drove north toward the cabin, windows down, radio off, just the sound of tires on pavement and my own breathing. The silence was deafening at first, then peaceful. I let it wash over me, cleanse me. I didn't cry. I didn't feel sad. I felt light, like I'd been carrying something heavy for years, and finally set it down. "Free," she called. 19 missed calls by the time I checked my phone that afternoon. Voicemails ranged from confused to angry to panicked. Jennifer texted, "Are you okay? You just left." But even in her concern, there was accusation. Rebecca's messages were different. Not "Are you safe?" or "What happened?" Just "Where are you?" and "When are you coming back?" And finally, "Who's paying the electric bill?" That was the kicker. She still didn't ask where I went or why. Only what bills I'd be covering. I responded to one text, just one. "I'm fine. Don't contact me again." Then I blocked both their numbers. The peace that followed was immediate and overwhelming. No more notifications. No more demands. No more guilt trips. I sat on the cabin's porch, phone silent in my hand, and watched the sun set over the mountains. The sky turned orange, then pink, then deep purple. Somewhere far away, Rebecca was probably panicking. But here, in this moment, I was finally truly calm. The rest could wait. She tried using the joint card the next morning. Declined. She tried again at a different store. Declined again. She called the bank, frustrated and confused, demanding to know why her card wasn't working. The bank representative explained that the joint account no longer existed. It had been closed, all funds transferred to a separate account in my name only. Everything now rerouted. New accounts, new structure, all legal, all documented, all done weeks ago when I'd started planning this. She was officially cut off. I'd left her exactly what she'd contributed to that account in the last 3 months, $800, in a check on the kitchen counter. Everything else, the thousands I deposited from my paychecks, was gone. Moved. Protected. Rebecca called the bank back 3 times, each conversation more heated than the last. They couldn't help her. The account had been joint, but I had every right to close it and move my funds. She had no legal recourse. I imagined her standing in the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, finally understanding that I wasn't coming back. That this wasn't a tantrum or a temporary break. This was done. The mortgage company called her a week later. I know because she left me a screaming voicemail before I blocked that number too. Payments had been missed, 2 months now. She didn't know the refinance deal meant she was the sole borrower now. Didn't understand that when she signed those papers, she'd taken full responsibility for every payment. And now she was months behind because she'd been relying on my income to cover it, income that was gone. The mortgage company didn't care about her excuses. They wanted payment or they'd begin foreclosure proceedings. Rebecca made under $40,000 a year at her receptionist job. The mortgage was $2,200 a month. The math was brutal and simple. She couldn't afford it. Jennifer certainly wasn't helping. She had no job and no income. Tyler was still in school. Rebecca was drowning, and for the first time, there was no one to bail her out. I felt a twinge of something. Not quite guilt, but something close. Then I remembered her words, "Know your place." The twinge disappeared. She made this bed. Now she could lie in it. Mrs. Chin sent Rebecca a formal letter, as I'd requested. It arrived certified mail, requiring a signature. The letter formally informed her of the trust, of my actual legal name, and of my exit from the marriage. It explained clearly that she had no legal claim to any of my inherited assets. That our marriage, while valid, had kept finances largely separate. That the house was now solely her responsibility. That I would be filing for divorce. Everything laid out in precise legal language that left no room for misinterpretation. Rebecca went quiet after receiving it. No calls, no texts, no attempts to reach me through mutual friends. Just silence. I imagine she read that letter multiple times, trying to find a loophole, some way to fight back. But there wasn't one. Mrs. Chun had made sure of that. Everything I'd done was legal, documented, and airtight. The trust information hit her hardest, I'm sure. Learning that the man she'd called worthless, the man she'd mocked and belittled, was actually worth millions. That he'd been playing poor while watching her true colors emerge. That he'd left her exactly as poor as she'd accused him of being, while he walked away wealthy. The divorce papers were delivered to her at work. I'd arranged it specifically that way. Not out of cruelty, but necessity. Her workplace was public, witnessed, ensuring she couldn't later claim she never received them. Filed, final, and firm. No-fault divorce in our state, but with extensive documentation of her financial irresponsibility and emotional abuse attached. Just in case she tried to contest it. She cried to her co-workers. I heard through the grapevine. Someone I used to work with knew someone who worked with her. Small town, word travels. She apparently broke down in the break room, sobbing about how she didn't understand what happened, how her husband just vanished, how she was losing everything. Her co-workers comforted her, naturally. They didn't know the full story. Didn't know about the insults, the sister who wouldn't leave, the way she'd systematically broken me down. They just saw a crying woman and assumed she was the victim. I didn't care. Let them think what they wanted. The only opinions that mattered were the judges and Mrs. Chen's. And they both had all the documentation they needed to see the truth. Jennifer tried to sue me for emotional damages for being evicted. Yes, evicted. Without my income, Rebecca couldn't afford to let her sister live there rent-free anymore. She'd asked Jennifer to contribute or leave. Jennifer left, furious, and immediately filed a lawsuit claiming I'd promised her she could stay as long as she needed. My lawyer, Mrs. Chen's associate, a younger woman named Patricia, actually laughed when she read the complaint. "This won't go anywhere," she assured me. We countered with harassment documentation. Every insult, every snide comment, every time Jennifer had undermined me in my own home, all documented with dates and witnesses. We filed a cease and desist order. Jennifer dropped everything within 2 days. She couldn't afford a lawyer for a case she'd never win, and she knew it. She slunk away to move in with some friend or other family member, her tail between her legs. I never heard from her again. The cease and desist ensured she couldn't contact me directly, and she was smart enough not to try. Rebecca lost her sister's support, emotional and otherwise. She was truly alone now, and it was entirely her own doing. Their house went up for auction 4 months after I left. Rebecca had tried everything: loan modifications, payment plans, selling possessions online. Nothing was enough. The bank foreclosed. I didn't buy it. Didn't need to. I had the cabin, had property, had more than I needed, but I watched from across the street on auction day, sitting in my truck, wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap. Strangers carried out furniture she'd once mocked me for picking out. That couch I'd slept on. The kitchen table where she'd insulted me. The bed we'd shared before Jennifer took my place. All of it, tagged with auction numbers, carried away by people who'd never know its history. Rebecca stood on the lawn, arms wrapped around herself, crying. Tyler was with his father that day. Jennifer was nowhere to be seen. Rebecca was completely alone, watching her life being dismantled piece by piece. I started the truck and drove away before she could see me. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt tired. This wasn't revenge. It was just consequence. My new life at the cabin was quiet in ways I'd forgotten life could be. I built a workshop in the barn, filling it with tools and projects. I learned to cook for myself properly, not out of obligation, but because I enjoyed it. I made things I actually wanted to eat. I read books. I hiked the property. I fixed up the cabin slowly, adding small improvements. Some nights I sipped bourbon by the fire, good bourbon, the kind I'd never bought when I was with Rebecca, and thought about everything. Her words echoed sometimes, "Know your place." I'd smile, glass in hand, and think about how right she'd been. I didn't need to know my place. And my place was here, in this cabin surrounded by trees and peace, with money in the bank and no one to answer to. My place was not in that house, not with that family, not being treated like I was less than human. I found my place, and it was nowhere near her. And that knowledge, that certainty, was worth more than anything I'd left behind. I was home. Finally, actually home. She emailed once, months later. It came to an old email address I rarely checked. No apology in the message. Just confusion, hurt feelings, questions about why I'd left so suddenly, complaints about how hard her life had become. She said she missed me, not because she loved me, but because life was harder without someone to handle the responsibilities. She asked if we could talk, maybe work things out, said she understood if I needed space, but couldn't I at least help with Tyler's school expenses? I read the email twice. Then I deleted it without responding. Not because I'm bitter. I'm not. I'm just done. Some people only realize what you were after they lose access to you. And by then, you've already remembered your worth. I closed the laptop and walked outside into the mountain air. The sun was setting again, painting the sky in colors that took my breath away. Somewhere far away, Rebecca was probably checking her email, waiting for a response that would never come. But here I was free. I found my place. And I'd never forgotten my worth again. The end.